All right, we're going to try something new today where I go back to a video I posted and look at the most popular comments. I've been slightly drinking, but we're going to move past that, and I'll respond to some of them. And I've had my official record broken for highest percentage dislike video. I'm oddly a little proud of that. And that's my recent review of Dresden Files, which I kind of expected it. I kind of trashed the series a little bit and said I'm not going to pick up more. Which, after a few very articulate and well put together comments saying, yes, this was the weakest entry in the series, and they think after the next one especially, it gets much better, I've been pretty much convinced to keep going. Yes, I'm using the right microphone. What I would like to do is go through some of the highest voted comments and respond to them, because people made some good points, some issues were raised, and some people made points that clearly demonstrated I did not articulate myself well enough. So I would like to go in and read some of these comments to clarify in my review. That being said, I am not backpedaling. I ain't no good kind. I'm not going to try and say I didn't say what I said. And no, I entirely stand behind what I said. But I do not think I said it well. So I'd like to clarify. So the highest voted comment, and honestly the one that convinced me to keep on reading and I eventually pinned to the top because it did a great job, was by Paul Williams. And Paul said, "You articulate some very fair criticisms, Daniel. I myself quite am a fan of the Dresden Files, though I agree they have flaws. So does everything. Nothing's perfect, and I will never claim that it is. In fact, Blood Rites is one of my least favorite installments in the series. That has become clear as I've gone through more and more comments in this video. It is pretty widely considered the worst I'm seeing. Butcher has defended the sexism of books by arguing that Harry's limited and flawed perspective colors their narration. I think there's some merit to that. However, as you point out, stripping Murphy in the face of laser grid is more silly than anything else and does signify a more general problem, though I don't feel it's nearly as bad as it could be." Entirely agree. And that's why up until this point, I've largely said that the perspective issue on women in Dresden Files hasn't bothered me as much, because I understand it's just the perspective of this one guy. And up until this point, women haven't been put into positions that just felt ridiculous. But what happened with Murphy really did, and it kind of soured me on that whole defense of it being Harry's perspective for the series, because finally I feel like Jim Butcher crossed a line, at least for me personally, where I was like, and now you're actually treating the women in this way rather than just having it be a perspective, which I'm pretty sure the point there is what you just made, so I'm just doubling down, I guess. Murphy, Charity, and other females in the series, even when described on a very physical level by Harry, also express more than significant depth and intensity of character. Then again, it's been a few years since I read the earlier books of the series, and maybe if I revisited them, I'd be more concerned. I would say really only Murphy has a level of character depth that would qualify as really good character depth in my mind, though I've never reread the books. I'm not all the way through the series. I don't know what you're referencing in terms of what could be later to now. I think Harry's love interest has also had a decent amount of depth, but again, it was almost entirely about him. And I guess it kind of just more hurt my view because it was the one female character who had never had this stuff happen to her, just got like the full brunt of Jim Butcher's views on women through Harry in this one, and that kind of just like soured it a little bit for me. I was like, this is the one where it seems different. It's the one female Harry doesn't objectify and doesn't get put in these situations, and then we turn around and it's like the worst ever. So I guess that was so jarring that, yeah, it really did sour, and I stand by what I said. What happened to her was borderline inexcusable for the narrative, because Murphy to this point has kind of been the counterpoint for Harry's view, and so damaging that I didn't really like. It kind of felt like suddenly Harry's viewing her differently. I do disagree with your claim that the books are the same, or at least similar to a detrimental degree, except for Full Moon, which is way too similar to Stormfront on in its story basis. Certainly the books, especially the first few, have similar structures, but what genre doesn't have its staple structures? Wheel of Time has about as typical structure as possible, with small variations. Eye of the World begins with heroes and obscurity. I'm going to skim over your comment here a little bit because of obvious spoilers vaguely in the series. I know a lot of my viewers are just starting Wheel of Time, so I'm going to skim past this. Though I would throw up a defense for Wheel of Time, saying that yes, while it does follow a lot of typical fantasy tropes, it branches out and exceeds them with remarkable character work and uses those tropes as a basis to grow pretty much an extension off that had previously not been done before. It uses a stable basis of essentially the groundwork Tolkien laid to grow a grander, wider, and better done of the fantasy genre that was already established. And that was pretty much the intent from the beginning, and Robert Jordan knew what he was doing. Why that seems an issue when compared to Dresden Files for me is I don't feel like Dresden Files up to this point has exceeded just being a retread. The difference between being a retread and using your origins to then improve and grow shouldn't really need explaining for me beyond that. And when it comes to your point about repetition of story, I'm just going to disagree. I do find it repetitious, but we're going to get into that more later with more comments, so moving on. That being said, I would invite you at a future date to read one more book in the series, Deadbeat. I would not extend this invitation if it weren't the very next book in the series, and if it weren't, I feel a significant game changer. And basically the comment finishes off by saying that Deadbeat is one of the best entries and pretty much addresses what I'm looking for. And if that's the case, I'm going to pick it up. In fact, yesterday I did, or day before yesterday, because I delay these videos, I did actually begin reading Deadbeat. So that will be happening in the fairly new future, because I want to go ahead and decide, am I going to move on? Is Jim Butcher going to evolve as an author to a point where I am going to stick with the series, or are these kind of tumorous problems on the series going to kill it for me? And I feel like Deadbeat, if it's one of the more solid entries, is probably the way for me to tell that. Ending on a bad note for the series just seems unfair. We had another one from Dimitri Alexander who said, a lot of people dislike the first Dresden. I love it, but Blood Rites was one of my least favorites in the series. The next one is my favorite by far. And again, that kind of hit the nail home and was like, all right, I got to pick up at least one more, because I do enjoy the writing of Dresden Files. Jim Butcher has fun with his stories, almost more just raw fun with the reader than I think any author I can think of. Like, it's really remarkable how much just passion and love he's clearly putting into these stories. So for that, yeah, there is still an enjoyable element there that has been remained consistent, even in the worst entries. So for that reason, yeah, I'm willing to keep going and pick it up. We had someone telling me to please be careful, showing clips in movies and stuff. I'm well aware. Trust me, I've dealt with copyright strikes before. I kind of know how to work the system now, so I'm good, I promise. We had someone who's bringing up the fact that I did not mention the fact that dogs are introduced, and they're saying it's showing I'm clearly biased for cats. And I will have you know that even though I own a cat, I prefer dogs. Don't tell Pips. I really do. I grew up with them. I don't have the time to take care of a dog right now, and I love animals in general, and I wanted to help a little furry friend have a home, so that's why I have Pips, and I love the guy, and I'm taking care of him now. And then we had a comment from a very frequent poster, Jared Mastan, who usually leaves very well thought out dissenting opinions, and I've respected quite a few of his comments. This one does have some good points, and is really the one that made me realize I didn't clearly communicate a few things in the video, but he does start out with what I think is the weakest point made in this entire comment section. So I'm going to address that, and then we'll move on to what I thought were his more reasonable concerns. Jared starts off by saying, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. They are all very different books. Evil wizards, werewolves, ghosts, vampires, fairies, demons, and now a different kind of vampire and a trio of porn star sorceresses. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I don't know if you're joking. I would appreciate if people put /s if they're being sarcastic, but no, changing the monsters does not mean it's a new story that isn't suffering from repetitiveness. That there's a reason people are tired of seeing the superhero origin story. Yes, Doctor Strange and Iron Man are very different in terms of powers and skins and what they are, but their story hits the same beats, which is what I was bringing up with Dresden Files. It hits the same beats. I hope that was communicated clearly. I think most people got that. That's also me clarifying the people saying, no, like it's not repetitious. I really don't think reskinning the story changes it. Those beats I said are hit in 3 out of the 6 Dresden Files books. So, yeah. I really think you made a weak point there if you're being serious. And you keep talking about how it's all wrapped up at the end. How about the war Harry started? The war that's had no ramifications so far? That's not wrapped at all. Harry still owes Mob 2 favors. Yeah, he does owe her 2 favors. And again, it's not brought up. It doesn't have ramifications for the story that I just read. And it's this loose hanging thread that I feel like Jim Butcher will just pick up when it'll best serve him. And then it'll just be something that's easily played with, because Jim Butcher does not deliver stakes for Harry for me very well. That's one of actually the consistent, even when I felt the strongest entries for Dresden Files, where when things are supposed to feel like they're really going down, I've never really bought it. I've never really bought the stakes of Dresden Files, and that's purely a personal preference thing, but that really hurts what you're bringing up here in terms of like these, it's not wrapped up neatly. Well, to me, it really feels like it is, and I hope people realize this is a personal preference criticism, but it's because these loose hanging threads do not feel relevant to the books. And with the amount of people who agreed with me in this comment section that these books are very repetitious, I don't think I'm alone in thinking that, and I think I'm going to stand by my point there that yeah, they wrap up neatly and they're repetitious and there's not really much that's continuing, even in terms of character growth, which no one defended character growth in the comments section. I was hoping someone would, but no characters really changed in Dresden Files up till now. I'm open for down the road that to change. Just like your criticism of 4, where you said that you wanted more PI and less fighting in a war. I think you're criticizing the books over what you think it should be over what it is. And this, Jared, is a great point, because I have not communicated this well enough when talking about Dresden Files, and I definitely feel like I didn't do a better job. It's not that Harry was off fighting in a war that bothered me. It wasn't that it was branching out from him being this supernatural detective. It was that it was poorly done. I thought it was a really clunky and odd change for Harry, that instead of feeling like what it was trying to present to the reader as this kind of, oh, Harry's out of his depth and it's so intense, the stakes are so high, because I feel Jim Butcher's not the best at delivering stakes, it just more felt like this awkward, poorly done fish out of water situation. Not like Thor Ragnarok, where the fish out of water worked, more like Thor, where it just felt awkward. Why should a wizard PI never get into scenarios where he's way over his head? That's kind of the point of the genre, isn't it? No, it's not, but I also never made that criticism. I'm very okay with Harry getting in over his head. Almost every book feels like he's getting in over his head, and the best ones are the ones that do kind of somewhat deliver on stakes because he's really in over his head. The first one being a great example. So this one, I feel like, is another kind of out-of-place response to me, because I never said Harry shouldn't be over his head. I just said this one situation didn't work for me. And here, why should there be some 12-book running mystery that never gets solved, but we get a new hint every book? Again, I never said that should be a thing. This is something people do a lot online, where they'll change your argument or insert their own, basically, interpretation of your argument that doesn't fit what was said at all. And again, I never said this should be the case for Dresden Files, so I don't know what you're talking about here. Is that the kind of running plot you want? Like those TV shows where you try to find out who murdered their partner and don't find out until the season final 12 years later? Nope. Never said that at all. You realize you can have individual contained episodic books and also vary in plot and story beats and influence each other while having them being episodic and close-ended. I'd be fine with that. That's not what Dresden Files is, especially since he changes the formula quite often. The last several books in particular, there's a reason one of them is called Changes, after all. And here you're pulling from books I didn't read, haven't read, and have no influence on the review I just put out. So your response, I liked what you were bringing up, and I feel like I did need to clarify, but I really think you fell apart there at the end, because I didn't say the things you're saying I said at all. And if you want examples of a episodic thing where there can be overarching running plot lines that do influence episode after episode, like it or hate it, but the show recently, Sherlock, has done a phenomenal job of that. There are individual contained mysteries, but overarching running plot lines that influence and redirect and have hints throughout. The stakes feel high. It does feel like there's some kind of bigger, ominous story going, and while that's been hinted at in Dresden Files, it's not done nearly as well. Again, I'm not saying I love the show Sherlock or it's phenomenal. I do really like it. I think it's a really good show, but I'm not trying to use that as an example saying like it's the reason it should be compared. No, I just think they're similar in how they're trying to do it. And while Sherlock did it well, Dresden Files is not. And again, you can level many criticisms at Sherlock. It had an incredibly weak ending as a show and is not as good as a lot of people claim. I know I put it in like one of my favorite TV shows lists. That's one of the videos I'm like most embarrassed about. That's a really bad video. I made it in like a huge rush after work one day. Oops. But I hope this comment response, not a clapback. I don't want to just be like roasting people or dragging through the coals. I want to actually address criticisms people bring up and respond to what I think is valid criticism, clarify where I need to clarify, and point out some logical arguments when I didn't say things that people are saying I said. So if you enjoyed this, does this change how you think I'm thinking about Dresden Files? Because again, I don't hate the series. I just feel like Jim Butcher has flaws that are fundamentally destroying what has a lot of potential. But if the next one, Deadbeat, really picks it up like a lot of people are claiming, trust me, I'm in. There's a lot I love about Dresden Files, and I'm very interested to see where it goes. It's just there's these issues that will not go away. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.